Excited to be here with another edition of NAMI at Home Live. NAMI Tennessee at Home Live. I can't believe I forgot the state. Shh, don't tell anybody. I want to tell everybody, if you are not already signed up for NAMI Tennessee's email list, you're missing out on one of the coolest free things that the internet has to offer. It comes out about once a week, and it covers everything from what NAMI Tennessee is up to legislative advocacy points, things that you can do to make Tennessee a better place for people living with mental illness and their families. And it just comes right to you. It just shows up. You just go to namitn.org, sign up for the email list. I highly recommend it. And I do this every week, so I really, really recommend it. 5 more signups, toaster. All right, well, that's enough of that. We have a very cool guest, Kim. Kim, tell the audience who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Kim Rush King, and I currently am employed with NAMI Tennessee, and my position is the statewide CIT Director. So I'm very glad to be here, Gabe.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So let's, I like to call it everybody working with the same definition. I believe that everybody has heard of CIT. We talk about it a lot at NAMI Tennessee. Anybody that signed up for that aforementioned email list has certainly seen it. But let's make sure that we're all on the same page. Can you give us the TikTok version, the Reader's Digest version of what is CIT? And of course, why is it important for law enforcement?
Absolutely. CIT is Crisis Intervention Team. It's actually a program that was developed in Memphis, and it was advocates and the police department and so many other partners that came together and recognized that law enforcement had never really received any type of training in dealing with somebody who may be in a mental health crisis. And so these agencies got together, University of Memphis, and Major Sam Cochran and Dr. Rennie DuPont. They actually created CIT. And what it is, it's a community partnership. CIT is Crisis Intervention Team. And so you bring community partners together in your county, which would be your law enforcement, your advocacy, as well as mental health and several other partners. And what we do is we address some barriers with law enforcement and dealing with our folks that may be experiencing a mental health crisis. Plus, we provide 40-hour intensive specialized training. So it's just giving officers and first responders additional tools whenever they're going to be dealing with somebody that may be experiencing a mental health crisis.
So the question that came up, Kim, and thank you for that answer, is, and you sort of answered it with they don't receive a lot of training, but isn't law enforcement already trained? And if not, why not? And why is CIT the best training?
Law enforcement, when it comes to mental health, it's only been about 10 to 15 years in the state of Tennessee where their post-accreditation, which is vital for all law enforcement across the state, actually determined that they needed an hour in mental health training. Now it has increased to 2 hours. But they've never really had extensive mental health training to talk about what they've experienced when they've gotten that call on that mental health crisis. And so what we do through the training is we give them examples and we do role play of real calls to help them. And then we educate them to help them understand what mental health is all about.
One of the things that, just to keep on this subject for just a skosh more, one of the things that I hear from the law enforcement community whenever I do CIT is that they believe that the mental health community is saying, hey, look, if you do something wrong, if you act up, if you break the law and you have mental illness or a mental health issue, you get a free pass and you can do whatever you want. And it's just like a Monopoly get out of jail free card. Now, I know that is not our message. Can you talk for a moment about what we're actually saying? Because again, some people hear CIT, they hear people with mental illness need special treatment, and we're not saying any of that, but that gets mixed up in the community. And let's just go ahead and squash that right now.
Absolutely. And it's ironic that we're talking about this particular question. I was in a county that's here in Middle Tennessee this morning because they had started their 40-hour training in CIT. And I talk about that with the first responders and the officers that are in the class. And it's not a get out of jail free card. Really what CIT wants to do is just, again, provide some more tools for law enforcement to where they can understand maybe what they're seeing in somebody in a mental health crisis. But CIT does not usurp officer safety. So officer safety is always going to be number one, nor does it give the get out of jail free card either. We understand that we have some folks that if they break the law, then sometimes they have to pay for the consequences. They have to deal with the consequences. However, so many of our folks, when they have interaction with law enforcement, it really is along the lines of misdemeanors. And so even your officers will tell you, I don't want to take them to jail. I don't want to arrest them for this, but what else can I do? And that's what CIT brings to them. It teaches them other options.
Exactly. The example that I always use in CIT training, and I love it a lot because it appeals to, I think, everybody understands it. The example that I use is if you see your teenager in your purse, you're going to react differently than if you see your 2-year-old in your purse. Now, the base premise of neither one of them are allowed in your purse stands. But if you treat both of them exactly the same, you're doing a disservice to one or the other. So, but if you understand that there's two separate situations that need two separate tools that needs handled in two separate ways, then you end up with the outcome that you want, which is to keep both out of your purse. I think this one-size-fits-all approach is not served not only people living with mental illness, but it's not serving the officers either, because as you said,
that's right,
they get caught up in this situation where what do? Either let somebody go or arrest them, put them in the system, and they're just like, there's got to be a third option. I love CIT because it provides a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth option. Thank you.
And that's what CIT. No, I was just going to say, and that's what CIT does. So the question of why CIT, for that reason alone, it gives them different options. It educates them on the resources that they have in their community that they may have not known. It also introduces them to our mental health individuals or individuals dealing with a mental illness or in a mental health crisis, and it humanizes it. So,
yeah,
I love CIT.
I am a huge fan of CIT. As somebody who lives with bipolar disorder, I'm a really huge fan of people having training to know how to help me. I mean, that's just we could hard stop right there. We could end it right now. Why do you want CIT? Because I want people to know how to best help me.
That's right.
All right. Well, that's that alone is the big selling point. But the other thing that I say, police officers, law enforcement, they've never once pulled me over and told me I had a really nice car and I was an excellent driver, right? They respond to issues. That's the way that it's set up. They're reactionary. And that means that for the average police officer, they're not seeing people living well with people living with mental illness. Again, as I always joke, when I am walking down the street, nobody says, hey, there's a man with bipolar disorder doing well. He's picking up his groceries. He's running his errand. No, I'm just a guy. But if I'm in crisis, then it's, a gentleman with bipolar disorder had a breakdown in public. It was very scary. We didn't, and that becomes the narrative. Law enforcement only sees people with mental illness at their worst. And CIT provides an opportunity for them to talk to people like me and all kinds of other peers all across the nation who are like, look, that was my worst moment. Now, here are all the moments that followed that. So your work is so vital. It's so vital to getting me to those good moments, which, of course, you will never see. So we're getting a lot of great feedback. NAMI Chattanooga loves CIT. We love CIT too. And we love CIT so much that NAMI Tennessee has a new initiative, Kim, that I believe you're in charge of. It is called, are you in charge?
Yes.
Yeah. It's called the CIT Works Campaign. Tell us everything.
Well, we are excited. I mean, we've got a whole PR that we're doing in order to promote CIT across our state, because that's what we want to do. We want to have every county have the capability of having CIT available to them. And so with this PR firm, what we've done is we've developed, it's called CIT Works. We've actually developed a state CIT symbol or our logo. And we have created one-pagers, just very brief, one page, that can go out to communities to law enforcement departments, to other first responders, just giving them an idea of what CIT is all about. It also, we have something on our NAMI's webpage. It's called CIT Works. So if you go to NAMITN.org, and you will see one of the headings, it says mental health and criminal justice. Click on it, and you will see where it says CIT Works. Click on that, and that gives you more information about CIT. And what's even cool about that, even more so, is the fact if you're interested in CIT for your community, there is a form that you can complete that will come directly to me. It also has my contact information on, and I will contact you, and we'll see what we can do about getting CIT in your community. So it's just great.
Now, we are primarily in Tennessee, but I know that we have fans that listen outside of the state of Tennessee.
Right.
If somebody is outside of the state of Tennessee, will you help them as well?
I could probably refer for referral to the right person. We're always going to be interested in helping somebody. If I don't know the answer, I have no problem in telling you I don't know the answer, but I may be able to find somebody who does.
That is awesome. So obviously she can help a whole bunch inside Tennessee, and she can help enough to get you to the right place outside Tennessee.
Right.
So head over to namitn.org/CIT-works to learn all the information that you can. And I think it is fantastic. So let's talk about the goals behind CIT Works, right? I imagine that the biggest goal is to raise more understanding and to get more people to utilize CIT. But expound on that. How are you going to do it? Why is that the goal? How can we get this everywhere? Teach us everything, Kim.
Okay, Gabe, I'm going to do my best. So honestly, it really is kind of simple what the goal is, and that is to educate our state, to educate departments, first responders, that there is a program, because that's what CIT is about. It's all about the CIT community partnerships, that we can all come together because we're working towards the very same goal. So why not allow us to help in providing some education and being able to answer questions that I know that law enforcement and first responders have, and just continue to build that bridge. That's what CIT does. It really does build the bridge. And so through our campaign, we're wanting to promote that. We're wanting to show you what CIT is capable of doing and in your community. And that's just going to be always going to be the goal. So I want CIT available to every county, whether it's a small rural county that if they've got 10 officers, let's train all 10 officers.
Is there, this is kind of a bigger question, so we might have to break it down a little bit, but the first question I have is how many counties is it, like how many counties do we have left? How many counties are embracing this versus how many aren't?
Well, the exciting part is it's changing every day, because we establish community coalitions, which is that CIT partnership. But then we have other counties who participate in training in their neighboring counties. So as of right now, we've probably got about 18 to 19 counties that have a full CIT program. But my goodness, I believe total with training, it's about 33, 34. And we're constantly receiving information about, hey, I heard about this from this county, and so we're interested in that. What can you do to help us? So it's very exciting. It's just going to continue to grow. The State Department of Mental Health, you can go on their website and type in CIT in the search, and there is an interactive map that will show you a map of all of the state, of all the counties, that will actually show you what's going on in that county. And so I'm constantly updating that as well.
Now, Kim, is there, you've said a lot of great things, right? It's in a lot of counties. It's growing. The counties are helping neighboring counties. Is there any, pushback seems like too harsh of the words. Are there any counties out there or precincts or law enforcement groups that are like, no, we don't want that? And if so, why? Why aren't we in every county? What's the, I know there's a better word than pushback, but what's the reason that CIT isn't in every single county right now?
What I hear in working with counties across the state is right now manpower is very difficult. So they'll tell you we can't afford to send anybody because I can't afford to pay somebody else overtime to cover that shift for 40 hours. So that's one barrier. And I think the second barrier again is maybe not fully understanding what we're talking about with CIT, which in turn this particular campaign that's going to help. That's going to be beneficial. And money. That's what departments will tell
Always
you.
money.
It's always money. But see, that's what the beautiful part of CIT, it's free. What we do is free to departments. And you know, once you kind of start telling them that, and then they start asking a few more questions, then they kind of think, hey, I may be able to do this. Maybe we can go ahead and do this. You know, because it is a Tennessee model, CIT out of Memphis, because that's where it originated from, they've got extensive data to show how it reduces officer injury, how it saves the county money because we're not always locking these folks up. We're actually getting some treatment for them. So once you kind of start getting into that information, then they step back and go, hey, this may be something that we want to do.
Nice, nice. A question from the audience. We can just take. We're going to take questions from the audience for a moment. One of them is: are there any grants available that would cover the cost of overtime for police officers to attend? I know you mentioned the CIT training itself is free, but there's obviously costs of officers attending, getting them off the streets, et cetera. So is that something that precincts can look into? Is it available?
Absolutely. DOJ, Department of Justice, and BGA, Bureau of Justice. Oh, now I can't even remember the A. They actually have several grants. I mean, you can go on their website and look, and there's a lot of different grants. CIT right now, well, I should say that verbal de-escalation is really a buzzword, and it's hot right now when it comes for law enforcement and first responders. And that's one thing that we teach. That's part of the CIT model, is that verbal de-escalation. So DOJ is very interested in handing out grants to departments who want to implement CIT or want to be the lead for their department, as well as maybe some surrounding counties. NAMI currently has a federal DOJ grant that covers 8 counties in the state of Tennessee, and it's in the Mid-Cumberland area. And so we utilize that. What I have also found, not only is there some grants out there, but I look at the state as a hub, meaning that, for example, Putnam County, which is Cookeville, has a very strong CIT steering committee as well as providing training. Well, you've got some surrounding counties that are neighbors to Putnam that it's cheaper to send them to Putnam. And so it really does save some money for the departments. And that's what we try. We want to make sure that we do that. We want to give them options about that. But yes, there are grants out there.
Nice. Thank you so much. Now, I want to swing back to the CIT Works campaign. Now, obviously, it's sort of a hybrid. It is part public relations to get people aware of it and to educate, but there's also a boots on the ground aspect to it, where you meet with precincts, they get to meet with you. We've sort of talked about the PR portion. Now let's talk about the rolling our sleeves up and
Right.
getting to the hard work portion.
Well, I'm very fortunate because I do have a CIT team here at NAMI. So Leah Gray is our program manager for the West Tennessee, and Josh Crosby is our program manager for East. I will cover middle, but I cover the whole state itself as well. But what will happen is if somebody goes on to the CIT Works, completes a form because they're interested in CIT, or just happens to find my information on NAMI and emails me and tells me that they're hoping or interested in it, then I will meet with them. We can Zoom, or I'll meet you in person and we'll talk about it. And I can give you what CIT is, tell you all about CIT and what it's about. And it usually at that point, that's when it's sold. I like the face-to-face. Because we've
Nice.
all been under Zoom so much. So I like traveling to meet with these departments. And once we do that, then our next step is we bring in a couple of more partners and we have another meeting, make sure everybody's kind of on the same page here and understand what we're going to be doing. And then that's how we start developing it.
And when you say, so NAMI is instrumental in the development. I know that we've talked about that, but the goal here is sustainability. The goal is, right, rinse and repeat, that it can keep working month after month, year after year. It's NAMI doesn't come out, do it, go away, and then it's over and they have to call NAMI back, right? Can you talk about that sustainability and first the development aspect and then the sustainability aspect of the training?
Yes, and I think that's why it's so helpful to have a program manager for East and West, because NAMI will always provide technical assistance. But we will also, if it's a brand new county, we will work with that county. We will work with them on their steering committee. We'll work with them on their very first training or first 2 to 3 trainings that they do. And really the one way you sustain it is when you have those partners come together and for that common goal and actually determine what are some barriers, but what are some short-term goals we can do for our county? What are some long-term goals? Then ownership happens. And then through the training, we actually provide a train the trainer. So you'll have officers in mental health that'll go through that to be trainers for their community. And those are the ways you sustain CIT. That's why it's so important to understand CIT is not just training. It is not training. It is a community partnership. So we will provide technical support, and Josh will attend steering committees in the East. Leah attends them in the West. I attend them here. Sometimes I attend them in the East as well.
I know that the goal, of course, is the end goal is to get all the officers trained, right? We know that, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
Correct.
So let's say that you're a precinct, you're in charge of I don't know, you're a captain. I think that's right. You're a captain of a precinct, and you're like, okay, this lady's starting to make some sense. Right. I'm getting on board with this. I like saving money. I love officer safety. Our goal is to protect and to serve. And we really want to do that. We've heard about some bad outcomes. We don't want that to happen again. Okay. That's all fantastic. You've now changed that person's mind. But again, Rome wasn't built in a day. What's step one? Right. The wheels are turning. Now what? I know you're going to say email Kim, but after they email Kim, what's step one?
Honestly, the step one is my communication with that person, and I gauge what their interest is in CIT. And again, by explaining what CIT is all about, the partnerships as well as the training. So by doing that, I then let them decide, is this what you're interested in? And I've not had one yet that has said, no, that's not it. They always usually say, exactly, that's what we want. And then we're off to the races, because at that point we schedule another meeting. And it's like I said, we bring in advocacy, NAMI affiliates, we bring in mental health with law enforcement, and we build whatever bridge that needs to be there. And then we start talking about who else needs to be a part of this. Because again, you want to focus on barriers. That's the long-term piece of this. That's why, again, if you just kind of operate under training, it's not going to work. Because I can train anybody.
Right.
It's that partners. It's the partnerships. And so that's really the first step. And I'll come to them. I'll go to them. I was very fortunate to be in Ray County last week because they're interested in it.
Oh, that's awesome. Kim, one of the things that you said there was that once they're interested in it and they want it, they like it, and what they want are better outcomes. Now, I completely agree. Everybody wants better outcomes. That's great. But better outcomes is kind of one of those conclusions, right? It's like, well, when you say better outcomes, we know what we mean, but specifically what they're talking about is they want the officers to, I don't want to say they want the officers to behave differently, because that sort of sounds,
right.
It sounds, that's not the vibe that I'm going for, but they want them to have other tools and make different choices so that the outcomes are in fact better. What is the difference in behavior? So if I'm an untrained CIT officer and I come upon this scene, this is what my training tells me to do. But if I'm a trained CIT officer and I come upon the exact same scene, these are the changes I make. What are the differences there that lead us to those better outcomes?
Well, there are certain core components of CIT that we always stress and through the training, but then the partnership. And that is when you have a CIT trained officer, first of all, the person in a mental health crisis recognizes that they've taken the time to want to know and learn more about them and maybe what they're experiencing. Second of all, it's patience. Now, I can't speak to law. I'm not an officer, so I will never pass judgment on what they do and the split decisions that they make. But they're always in that we've got to get through this call so we can get to our next one. Rightly so. But under CIT, you slow down. If it takes 2 hours to deal with this person in a crisis, you're going to take 2 hours. So that's the difference as well. So patience, listening. We talk so much about just that active listening. You know, we talk about slow down. We do exercises to show, could you hear somebody if you had 4 different officers yelling at you? It's to slow down and understand maybe, you know, something is going on here. And we strongly encourage them that we want you to get to know your folks in your area, if it's a zone or whatever you may call it, when they're not in a crisis. Because again, that's where the humanization comes in at. And we want to be able to humanize them. But it's just amazing when I teach those trainings and I'm involved in those trainings. Gosh, you can just see the light bulb go off because all of a sudden, this is your sister.
Right.
That's your mother. And that's what we say. You know, how is it you would want the officer to come to treat your sister? Well, I want them to treat him with respect. Well, what's the difference? And so that is the difference between a non-trained CIT officer and a trained one.
Now, I know that
engaging.
I know that you started to answer this question. I think it's a great question, and I want to give you the opportunity to expound on it. Has CIT changed law enforcement attitude toward mental illness? And I want to add a little caveat and say not only just the officers who are on the street and actually meeting, but you know, what about systemically? What about you know, all of the you know, the captains, the brass, I guess is the word that often gets used. Is the culture shifting to where law enforcement is starting to see people with mental illness differently than they did before the CIT program?
I think so. And actually, it's just really cool because it never fails that when a training is completed, I'll get an email or a text from an officer who just finished their first 40-hour training, and then they got a call on somebody in a mental health crisis. They tried what we taught in CIT, and they're just amazed that it worked. Because then they'll come back and go, you know what? I didn't arrest them because they didn't need to be arrested. They begin to understand that they don't always have to be arrested. I didn't arrest them. I was able to find out some family members, contact those family members, and we got them help. And they feel so much better because when you honestly ask officers and first responders, why are you doing what you're doing? They got into this because they do want to help and they do want to protect their community. And furthermore, when we're talking about implementing CIT in a county, we talk top down. So I'll meet with the chief. I'll meet with the sheriff. Because again, if the sheriff and the chief are not on board, it's going to be really difficult for the patrol officers and the lieutenants and the captains to actually implement CIT. It was so pleasing because in one of our other counties in Upper East Tennessee, in a training last year, the chief of that particular police department in that county actually went through the 40-hour training.
Oh, that's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. You know, we have a follow-up question from a little earlier that I just now noticed. Apologies, but you know, in the CIT Works program is designed to get not only support but to get more people doing this. And so I think this is kind of a fair question. How can we get the people in the right places to apply for these grants so that we can get more officers through the training? Because as you said, it does really start with that email. How can we how can we penetrate that consciousness? Because I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of people in law enforcement from the top down that are just like, why are we're doing the same thing over and over again. We're getting the same results. Nobody's
Yeah.
happy with this. But there's no better solution. So we'll just rinse and repeat. And this is out there. What can we do it's sort of an advocacy question, right? How can
It
our
is.
audience advocate?
It is. And that's why it's so important for advocacy groups, the NAMI affiliates in the community. You are so important to the process of CIT. You're vital because you lived it, whether it's a family member or a person with lived experience. So that's when you go back to your sheriff, or if you know a patrol officer on the police department, go to them and get a meeting with the sheriff. Bring me in on it if you need to. That's when those conversations start. But we've got to start the conversation. We can't just say, okay, well, maybe they're going to have to make the decision to do this. That's not necessarily true. So advocacy is vital to this.
I'm going to follow up question to that. Let's say I'm not in law enforcement, but I am in one of the counties that does not have the CIT program. Can I contact you to learn how to advocate or learn maybe the best way to talk to my police office or my police department about this? Is that
Absolutely.
We just want so many reasons to email you, Kim.
I know. I love emails, Gabe. I just love them. But absolutely, you can. I mean, because that's what I'm here for, is to help. And I want to get this started. I got an email from a gentleman the other day on a particular county, and he sits on the city council because he had heard about CIT and he wants it for his town. So I've heard from so many different people, but absolutely feel free to email me and I'll see what we can do. And if need be, you and I will contact the sheriff or the police department together, and we'll set up a meeting. We'll go talk about it. Communication
is key. It is absolutely key. Kim, you've been around CIT for a while. This isn't your first day as the CIT guru of NAMI Tennessee. What changes have you seen? What has encouraged you since it started? This is sort of a question for the people. It's like, well, yeah, but CIT's been around for 10 years. Why are we still discussing this? What progress has you seen since you first started working with the CIT program?
I was so blessed to start working with CIT about 12 years ago when I started Rutherford County CIT. What was amazing to me is when officers found out what resources were available, but then they also had a point person. I made it a point, representing mental health, that if they had any questions, to contact me, to call me. And that's what I see. I love seeing bridges built between systems that always operated in silos. And they're beginning to recognize, we need each other. And that's what I have seen that has continued to grow. It was a very cantankerous relationship between mental health and law enforcement. Law enforcement thought that we just, hug people and, and kumbaya each other, when the reality is that's not what it's about. And so once they kind of understand who we are, we in turn understand them. It's amazing the things that can happen. And that's what I continually see every year with every new county.
So how long before all of Tennessee has it? I mean, what's your prediction? What's the over under on this? How fast are you moving?
Well, we are moving fast, but I believe, like you said earlier, Gabe, it's a marathon. It's a long term. And but to know that NAMI's committed to it, to know that our State Department of Mental Health is committed to this, we're in this for the long haul.
That is, whoops, I'm not on the screen. That is absolutely beautiful. I believe in the CIT program for so many reasons. The biggest one is to remove misunderstandings. As you've said, and as we've sort of talked about on here, there is this idea that one side believes that the other side is completely wrong, and that their side is completely right. And what the CIT program has taught us, if nothing else, is there's room in the middle. Like you said, law enforcement is like, oh, well, you just want to talk it out and kumbaya and hug everybody. a little bit of that was true. We do want to talk it out.
Right.
De-escalation works, understanding what's happening is works, getting all the facts, the facts as it pertains to that person with mental illness, looking at it from their point of view and understanding their point of view works. But nobody in the mental health community was ever saying, hey, look, if you have severe and persistent mental illness or having a mental health problem, that you can terrorize a neighborhood,
Mm-mm.
you can cause property damage or scream at people. Nobody's saying that. But from law enforcement's perspective, that's what it looked like. And that's one of the things that I love about talking to people at CIT, because they're just like, look, it can never happen your way. You just can't hug out every problem. I'm like, who
Mm-mm.
said that? Like who said that?
Right.
Where did this start? Along those same lines, Kim, I love, what are some other myths that you've heard in the CIT program in 12 years when you sit down and talk to law enforcement, like, we want to bring CIT, and the first words out of their mouth are, well, yeah, but we're not going to do X. And you're like, nobody's asking you to.
Well, honestly, I have to debunk, especially at the beginning of either in steering committees or at the beginning of trainings, when you have all these officers and first responders come in for it. They really do think that this is just going to be mushy mental health stuff. And so you really have to know how to participate and actually how to talk to law enforcement. They are their own entity, absolutely. And they're not trustworthy of a lot of people, especially mental health folks. Um, and so that's one myth we try to debunk, that we're not here to tell you you've been doing this wrong, because sometimes they think that's what's going on. What we're here for is trying to help you and give you additional tools. And once they go through this training, they start buying into that and they recognize that. And then all of a sudden the floodgates open and they start saying, well, you know what? I had to deal with this person the other night, but I originally wasn't sure what to do. Now I think I feel pretty good about what to do. So that's another myth. And just kind of meeting the officer where they're at is something else. And that's not a myth, but it's just meeting the officer where they're at and trying to help them understand that it's okay. These are just additional tools. We're not going to
I
take
love that.
away what may make you feel secure. And it does not take the place. That's probably the biggest myth.
The I talk about CIT a lot. It's one of my favorite subjects, for such a variety of reasons, and way more than we have time to get into now. But you talk about those tools, and I always give the example. Could you imagine if you hired a contractor? Contractor shows up, bangs on the door, and is holding a hammer. And you're like, hey, I need you to fix, X, Y, Z. You're going to go get your tools. And the contractor says, I have my tools. You're like, but that's one tool. Yep, one
Right.
tool. You don't have like a van full of tools. Nope, one tool. You would fire that contractor so fast. But they're like, no, I'm loyal to this tool. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I've always used this hammer. Outcomes be damned. And I do think that, yeah, nobody's telling you to get rid of your hammer. We're just telling you to add some tools to the toolbox, as you've probably added tools to your toolbox your whole life. This is just another set of tools that you can choose
Mhm.
to use or absolutely choose not to use. Your decision based on the circumstance. Hey, maybe you'll like the screwdriver. I don't know.
Right. Well, it's always humorous to me because officers will come back and go, hey, I use this on my kids and it works. Because the reality is what we teach is something you can do and use with everybody, because it's really simple. It's knowing how to engage. It's having a conversation with somebody. That's what
Exactly.
it's all about. And because officers are always having to be reactive, that's what hinders them from doing that. But again, if you become a CIT officer, then you have that training to where you know that you're going to take the time to have a conversation.
I again, I'm a CIT fanboy. I can't lie. I really like the CIT program. I believe it has something for everybody, and it really does show. I really think that it does two things. We've talked a lot about how mental health people training police officers to understand what we're going through has been very, very helpful. But I want to
Mhm.
flip it for a moment. I think that CIT has a little bit of a silver lining in that there's many times I talk to mental health people and they're just like, I didn't know that. I remember when I was but a young CIT trainer, I said, look, here's the best thing that you can do. Just when you walk in the room, get down on your hand, get down on your knees and look the person in the eye when they're in that corner. And somebody raised their hand and said, okay, so your suggestion is that I get down on my knees with my back to the room because somebody's in a corner. Like they're like, do you realize how dangerous? And they explained it to me very politely. And I was like, that is something that I didn't consider. So again, a silver lining to the CIT program isn't just that mental health people have explained our situation and our limitations and our issues to law enforcement. Law enforcement has had this opportunity to say, look, you're mad at us for things that we cannot control. And mad isn't the right word, but you are not understanding this from the perspective of law enforcement in the same way that law enforcement is not understanding this from the perspective of people living with mental illness. And I've seen a lot of shift. Have you seen that shift, that conversation is now open?
Yes, absolutely. Because the fact is that bridge is there. The communication is ongoing now. And I learned something from officers and first responders every training I'm ever participated in. I really do. I have learned where every county has their own set of rules. I've learned about, like you were talking about, officer safety. And the other thing about CIT, it's co-taught. The CIT model is mental health and law enforcement teaching together. So I can give them that mental health perspective, but it's the officers that's going to say, now remember, don't forget your officer safety. Because again, CIT doesn't replace that.
Right.
And it's just fascinating to me to watch because again, I've learned so much so now to where I kind of understand some of their jargon. Which benefits me really because I was working with one county and I was talking and then started making some comments about, well, I'm sure you've probably dealt with this and this and this. And finally the jail administrator looked at me. She said, now you're talking our key. Now you're talking what we deal with. And so you just really do. You have to respectfully listen to what they're telling you. But I learn something all the time.
That is fantastic. I'm always fascinated when people are like, well, law enforcement has their own culture. They have their own language. They have their own. And I know that, 10, 12 years ago when I got started, this was, it was almost a criticism that people said that. And I just remember sitting in a meeting and I was like, do you think that people listening to mental health people understand our jargon? BP, just
no,
MR. Just there's so many shorthand. Actually, here's the best one: NAMI. They don't understand what we're talking about. Sincerely, we have every place has their own jargon, culture, the people they trust, the people they don't trust, the misconceptions. We close ranks. The mental health community is the same as the law enforcement community, as are all communities. I really agree with you that building that bridge, getting out of our silos, working together, understanding each other has just done wonders. And ultimately, the people who benefit the most are people in crisis, in a mental health crisis, people living with mental illness. So I'm super happy that all this work is going on. It's been fascinating to see the progress of the last 10 years. It's of course absolutely exciting to see the big push and all the effort that's going into it right now. So to summarize, if you want more information from Kim, just go to namitn.org/CIT-works. Check it out. Just go to namitn.org and you'll find it all right there. Kim, any last words?
Well, Gabe, I was actually going to say, I happened to notice that one question in the chat was, are police officers required to go through this training? And the answer is no, they're not. The philosophy is from CIT is that every officer has skills, just like we all do. And that's what really makes up a good team, is to have all these different people who have such great skills. But not everyone is a CIT officer. But not everyone is great when it comes to tactical. So everybody's different. So they don't make it mandatory. I have dealt with some departments who that's what they want to do, but I strongly discourage that. Now, what I do recommend for all officers to go through is a mental health first aid training. It's an 8-hour training in one day. It gives them the crux of what mental health's about, and it gives them some of just an idea and symptoms and things like that. But no, they're not required to actually go through the training. What's really cool, though, is when you start setting up CIT in the community and it's in existence, you'll have officers that will go to their commanders and go, I want to be trained in CIT.
I think that is awesome. Now, just I want to clarify just a little bit. I know that every state jurisdiction there's so much difference, but I believe that everywhere during the academy, during their training to become a police officer, there is mental health covered. So it's not like CIT or zero, right? There is a little bit of training, maybe.
Well, it really does depend on the training academy. Now, I can speak to TLETA, the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy here in Nashville, which several counties will send their officers here. And what the beauty of it is, there is an instructor at TLETA who I've known for about 12 years, and she is a CIT trainer. She wanted to bring in CIT and just introduce it to all these new recruits. Because the younger we can get them and help them understand this is what's going on, then the better off everyone's going to be. So TLETA has actually created a morning block on talking about mental health topics, but then in the afternoon, they'll actually do a little bit about role playing and bring in officers who are trainers across the state as well. And it just kind of helps them understand. And then they tell them, you go back to your community, whatever department you're from, you go back to your department and you ask for CIT.
Nice.
So
nice. I love that. Well, Kim, thank you so much. I want to remind everybody it's namitn.org/CIT-works. Gives you all the information that you need. Of course, you would know this already if you were signed up for NAMI Tennessee's email list, namitn.org. Again, it's absolutely free. It will help you become a better advocate, let you know where we need help, and let you know about all the cool things that NAMI Tennessee does. Things like NAMI Tennessee at Home Live, what we're doing right now. Kim, I know I asked any last words before, and you found a great question. Any last words before we hop on out of here?
CIT works.
CIT does work. Let me pop that back on the screen. Oh, I forgot to tell everybody about the walk. NAMI Walks 2022, reunited and it feels so good. Learn more at namiwalks.org/Tennessee or namitn.org or the email list, and you would already know. You're getting a theme here. All right, there we go. All right, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.